Hey guys, insecure about my height guy here, back with another Arduino tutorial video. In this one we're going to be covering the different types of loops. And the two loops we're going to be covering are for loops and while loops. So the while loop is basically like an if statement that just runs forever or until its condition is false. So the condition in an if statement, the condition is right here. So if this were to be false, then whatever is inside here will not run. But since it's true, and true will always be true, it'll always run. So you see serial dot print hello. Since we're in the setup, the setup isn't a loop. So you'll see when you open up the serial monitor, it'll print out hello. So then if we change that if to a while, the while says while this is true, then do that. And since true will always be true, this loop will run forever and never stop. It'll basically infinitely say hello, 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 hello. And eventually, if that were to take up enough processing power or whatever, it could crash whatever computer you're using. So generally, making while loops that run forever are terrible ideas. So generally what you'll do is you'll have some sort of variable. So say int a is equal to 0. You can say while a is less than 10, print out hello, and then each time add 1 to a, plus or equal to 1. Or you can just do the shorthand, which is plus plus. And that will run until, that'll run 9 times, or 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it went from 0 to 10. Or instead of printing out hello, what we could actually do is print out a. And then you can see actually how many times it's ran, or how the variable changes. So the variable starts at 0 and then goes all the way up to 9 because it's less than 10. If you said less than or equal to 10, then it would run when it's less than or equal to, and it would run all the way up to 10. I'd actually print out 11 times because if it would go from 0 to 10, 0 to 10 is actually 11. So that's kind of cool. And then so this loop right here, the void loop, this is actually basically a while loop that is always running. So anytime you're using something that needs to be in a loop, you can put in the void loop, because it's basically a while loop that's always running whenever your Arduino is activated. Whereas the void setup is a method or function that only runs once. So you can see in this while loop, there's 3 main key components for the variable. You can see there's the initialization of the variable, so saying int a is equal to 0. So you make a variable named a, you set it equal to 0. There's the saying while it's less than 10, and then there's the adding plus plus. So some really smart guy was like, okay, see, there's a lot of code that you have to do to make a while loop that runs a certain amount of times. Why don't we just make a loop specifically for running a certain amount of times? So that's what they did. They said, so the for loop basically goes for int I is equal to 0. So this part right here, I is less than or equal to 10. This part right here, and I plus plus. That part right there. And if you print out I, you can count that out. Ta-da! It is the same output, except you have about 3 or 4 lines less of code. And in code, you always want to use the least amount of code that you can to do something, because that's the most efficient way to do it. So for loops and while loops both have their advantages and disadvantages. For loops are really good for making a loop that you want to run a certain amount of times, whereas a while loop is good for a condition. Like say you have an ultrasonic sensor, and you want to see if the distance from the wall is greater than 10. And once it's less than 10, you want to stop. So you can say while variable whatever is greater than 10, then move forward. And then once it is less than 10, then stop. You can do that. So say you have, it's basically this right here, except that variable would change as a sensor is actually receiving information. Whereas a for loop, you can't really input new information. It's more just like a set loop that you want to run a certain amount of times beforehand, whereas a while loop is a little bit more recursive. And that's basically it. The while loops are basically just if statements that just run until their if statement is false, whereas if statements only run once unless they're in a loop. If you put an if statement in a loop, like if true. If you put an if statement in a loop, it's essentially the same thing as putting a while loop in there. So if true, this void loop runs forever, or while the Arduino is plugged in. So it'll just keep looping through and printing out hello because you're in a loop. So this method runs once, this method loops forever. All right.